Welcome back to the next session in our ICAEW CPD Conference. This session, AI in Finance, Transformative Trends and Applications, is going to, I think, be absolutely fascinating. It seems that every day somebody mentions something new about how they're using AI. It might be to do with audit or something work-wise, but half the time I have to say it's how to create a silly video with you looking like a baby. That is not what we're going to be talking about today. It might be fun, but in this session, Peter Beard, who's founder and managing director of Generative Finance Technologies Limited, will delve into the transformative trends, the applications of AI in accounting and finance. So welcome, Peter. So can you start off by giving us an overview of AI and the impact that generative AI is having on finance and the world of financial reporting?
Julia, absolutely. Let me share my screen and let's dive into it. Hopefully you can see that now. Excellent. So welcome everybody on this session in AI in Finance, Transformative Trends and Applications. In this session, we're going to be covering a few things here, and we're going to start off by looking at the impact and the current state of AI and how it looks in finance. We're going to be looking at the main challenges, what the trends are right now in terms of what they can do, in terms of their capability and their comprehension. We're also going to address the key concerns too, as this is something that might be front of mind, as well as covering what use cases might be available for your role right now. Lastly, we're going to take a look at that future outlook and then finish up with a Q&A with some questions. So with that in mind, let's jump in. So kicking it off, let's look at the impact and the current state of AI in finance. So as a recap, what is generative AI? Generative AI really is that part of that broader ecosystem of AI. It's a subset of artificial intelligence, as we know. One of the reasons it's become front of mind and so popular is because of how capable, accessible, and cost-effective it is for many users out there, being widely available, and the barrier to entry and the barrier to access this kind of technology is unprecedented, now more than ever. We know this because already, from a recent report from the Chartered Accountants Worldwide, is that more than half of accountants are already using GenAI at least once a week. What's interesting, though, is that might be once a week right now, but in terms of daily use, it's still only about 15%. This is really important because over time, we expect this to increase given how much scale and scope there is for it to impact your everyday work. This is very significant. And what are the key impacts to it? One of the ones are just purely on how it can perform in terms of many tasks, already including data analysis and answering queries. These large language models from the generative AI companies like OpenAI, Copilot, Grok, Gemini, and Perplexity have demonstrated a very high performance in terms of their understanding and in terms of their agentic behavior as well. What we're noticing right now, a big impact is how it's affecting the professional, the accountants like us. And what we're seeing is that the type of preparer work that's being done is that the generative AI is now acting like your preparer. It's taking off that workload that you might have done before, and it's shifting you now from a preparer to a reviewer, where we can see that it's generating outputs based on information that's been inputted, and means that we as the professional can look at it from a review perspective, of course, adopting our professional skepticism and looking at those outputs and then producing a final output based on that. We can also see that it's enhancing significantly areas including financial accounting and reporting, given its ability to drive data-driven insights and also to be able to cite reputable and authoritative sources as well. One of the things in terms of the current state is just the impact of GenAI, and we can bring this to life really with how the technology is developed. And there are three things that to take away from here, is that GenAI is becoming more capable, more useful, and more trustworthy. The big six in terms of GenAI models, which we discussed earlier, are improving in accuracy in terms of their benchmarks. We can see over here that, for example, Grok 3 has recently performed a very high level in terms of its ability to perform human examinations. This example here is the American Invitational Mathematics Examination. This is one that's invite only for high-performing students, and it's being used, it's a 15-question based test, and it's seeing how it compares to that result. And we can see here it's performing exceptionally high in terms of these metrics, as are the others, whether it be ChatGPT 04, the most recent model, and Gemini 2.5. This is the latest GenAI model from Google. The next one is GenAI is becoming more useful. So looking at the GenAI tools, there are now more features and functionalities that are being added. You might know some of them already. For example, being able to chat, being able to research on the internet, being able to create images or even video. In terms of from a finance and accounting perspective, there are three which make a fundamental shift and an improvement to these tools: deep research, human-like reasoning, and teamwork collaboration. Deep research allows us to go that extra step by really asking the models to think aloud, transparently, so we can see what answers that they produce. And it allows us to give full-sighted reports, which we can verify. The next one is human-like reasoning, being able to see its chain of thought, understanding how, not only what the answer is, but how it got to the answer as well. Really fundamental so us as the accountants and finance professionals can see it's becoming more transparent and trustworthy. The third of which is team and work collaboration. Recently, these tools have added the ability for projects or spaces, which means that on an enterprise or team plan, it allows you to connect with other colleagues or stakeholders or professionals and be able to converse in the same chats together and share that information and scale up the workflow. And the last one in terms of the current state is that GenAI is becoming more trustworthy. Now more than ever, more and more companies are prioritizing security. We're already seeing large-scale enterprises, from professional service firms to financial analyst firms to consulting firms, already using them at scale. And this is because there are of a few fundamental reasons. One is that enterprise plans are now available widely across these big six. SOC Type 1 and Type 2 certification, so in terms of how the IT is controlled, is becoming more widely available, allowing us to build assurance and trust over them. The third is that they are now all going across a GDPR compliance, both from a UK and EU perspective. And thirdly is that for those that need a particularly sensitive handling with it, is that they all offer now on-site deployment via the API, which means if you're uncomfortable using them on the cloud, you may be able to request for an enterprise plan having them deployed on-site in your own premises. Next one is in terms of how it's impacting us, the professionals, and how it's impacting our people. And what we're seeing, there are two clear things that have come out of this, is that GenAI is presenting a new challenge for us in the profession. We can see that a lot of members around the world are facing new challenges in terms of being able to adapt, being able to be trained, and being able to upskill in terms of how to deal with this new type of tool. In of itself, the accounting industry has faced this problem before in times gone by, whether it be the introduction of cloud software or the introduction of Excel or the introduction of, going back further, the personal computer. So we can see here, this is not new in terms of history, but it's very much new in terms of its scope, scale, and width of capability. We know that if we don't use it now and if we don't embrace it, there will be an urgency to adapt because of its ability to do new types of tasks and elevate our role within the profession. In terms of the adoption, we know that a lot of accountants are beginning to use these tools now, whether that be from their personal use case in day-to-day life, or maybe start to use them professionally, but not at the frequency that might be considered a daily workflow yet. We can expect to see this happen in the future, and we can see that as we see over time just how much time these tools can save, the cost-saving values that can be drawn to them can be immense when done at scale. So this is really, really powerful, and it's something that's to be excited about.
It certainly does sound exciting, Peter. I mean, there's so many opportunities there, and I'm seeing this reflected in some of the questions as well. Are there specific examples that you can give us as how finance professionals can use these tools if they're only using it 15% of the time, if you like?
Of course, yes. So there are a host of applications that we can use as professionals. We do have barriers as well. We can share those later, but we can just highlight them now. We can refer back to them. But there are lots of trends and use cases that we can have within our profession. There are so many. We've just listed a few examples here. Anything ranging from customer due diligence to accounting estimate documentation to business valuation modeling. We can see here that we're going to focus on 3 that we've highlighted here, just to bring it to life and see what that might look like. We might look at financial research and analysis and how that can be used using GenAI, finance and tax reporting assistance, how that might look using a GenAI tool, and using something with inventory aging. If we're an accountant that manages stock, how might we look at that task in terms of using GenAI to make us faster and more reliable? So let's dive in. In terms of a first example, we might be able to do financial research and analysis. We can see this is proven already. We might be able to use GenAI, for example, to research company financials. We might take an annual report, for example, and research and request to provide the 5-year cash balances for that company over a period of time, asking it to give us the source material. And we can see that this works. We can see that when we input this data, we've got an example here. So one might be EasyJet PLC, where we ask for the cash balances over that period. And we can see not only does it produce it, but also it gives direct citation to the specific page and annual report where it came from. We can then go one step further and say, can you produce us a visual? Produce us a graph, produce some insight and analysis. And it can do just that. We can ask it to produce this cash position over time, and then we can ask it to give commentary and also perhaps some strategic recommendations as well. Now this is really significant just in terms of how quickly we can do this, all through natural language. Talking like a human to a machine makes it so much more fluid and natural that even us as accountants, we don't need to know code, and we don't need to be able to produce these kinds of results. It truly is transformational. Moving on to the second one, we might be able to help with it assisting our finance and tax reporting. For example, a great use case is being able to understand any updated guidelines. We know that this is an evolving nature, and the regulatory landscape is not one that can be easy. So using it to find the latest guidance on a particular topic, whether that be from a tax perspective or from a financial reporting perspective, it can be really, really powerful. Just as an example here, we can see that when we're doing it, going through the search queries, we can get far more cited reports, more so than what we might do previously if we were to do it ourselves manually through a Google search. We might go through 5 or 10 sources, but with a generative AI tool, you can go through 50, sometimes even up to 100 sources, and it will pull the right information together for us to be able to review. Particularly with deep research as well, we may even come across complex tasks, for example, pension disclosure or a uncertain HMRC guidance, which might be open to interpretation. There might also be a scenario of looking at going concern, which in of itself, that can also be highly subjective, uncertain, or complex. It can then help us break down those requirements, understand what they mean, and then give us the cross-reference to where we can find that source material. So you can see here, just on this example, there are a few here that we can demonstrate on screen. Moving on to the third example and the last one for this session, inventory aging analysis. Now, this is a great one to see just how you can use these GenAI tools, not only with external data, but also with uh, your own business data as well. When looking over here, we can see that we can research industry benchmarks, guidance, or even communicate with our own files and understand what's happened during the period. This is great for both people in practice and in industry as well, because it gives so much more capability than previously with other technologies. For example, here, we might be able to ask, analyze my inventory for aged items more than 180 days. It's red. You've previously uploaded an inventory folder with an aged bucket analysis, and then you're able to retrieve that information and you can have a full conversation with your data, much like having an assistant on hand 24/7. We can go one step further and even ask for deep research or reasoning capabilities, seeing at how it calculated the aging buckets, what assumptions it might have made, what obsolescence risks it detected, or even determining write-downs that are compliant with IFRS. This amount of capability really can save us lots of time.
Thank you, Peter. I mean, that's fascinating, and we've just had a little glimpse, but I noticed there's some questions coming in about challenges and ethical concerns. And, would you put client data on ChatGPT? So perhaps we can think about an ethical issue and approach to this whole thing. What do we need to consider?
It's a really great question. And there are three things to consider as professionals within this remit. And it's to looking at the components of what generative AI is. The first one is looking at the inputs, really focusing on how we get answers from these types of tools. And what the first step is to look at is designing an effective prompt. This is really important so that we can objectively obtain the right information that upholds our 5 fundamental principles. This allows us to get the right level of information accurately, reliably, as best as possible. Now, down below, we've provided an example use case, an example prompt technique, which really helps bring that to life. You can see here, really focusing on task, persona, context, examples, and format. By covering all those 5 points, allows us to get the most out of these Gen AI tools and make sure that we'll be able to ask these prompts as best we can. You can see here that type of example down below, just showing that with the right context, the better the question, the better the answer. And that's a key fundamental when using a Gen AI tool, is that the quality of what you get out is directly driven by the quality of what you've put in terms of your question, as well as the internal data that you might upload if you choose the right plan. Applying our ethics first approach, it's really important to leverage the 5 fundamental principles. Now, fortunately, the ICAEW already have a robust framework for us to lean on and be able to apply. With any other technology, this is no different. So we can see one example might be of upholding these principles. Let's take integrity, for example. It's important that we show a good prompt, being objective and being honest with what we're trying to achieve. We can see here a bad prompt example, or might be give me a director's report that makes us look good, versus something that is far more honest and transparent of what we're trying to achieve within the confines and our ethical code. Another one might be objectivity. We're looking at revenue trends you might have over the period through sales data that you've obtained. You might want to look at saying, presenting the findings in a bullet point summary, being objective and neutral with how you frame your prompt, compared to the bad example where you're analyzing the revenue to support a positive outlook. So you've had a predetermined outcome and you're now introducing bias, which is a key threat to objectivity. We can see there's a couple more down here. One more to focus on is professional behavior, making sure that we uphold that professional behavior as well, making sure that we're referencing specific standards, whether that be IFRS, UK GAAP, or any other regulatory body that we need to comply with. And then also being hyper specific in terms of dates and periods so that we can able to get an accurate and reliable answer. So now we've had a look at the input and we've seen how to use the 5 fundamentals as a checklist before we submit. We could then look at the output and what we should be looking for when reviewing an answer. And there are a few things that we can use as a helpful checklist. The first and really important one is to look at where the sources came from. Fortunately now, the big 6 GenAI tools that we showed earlier all now have web-enabled search. So you can all turn on and see where those sources come from, whether that be from external web research or internal document search. It can still produce citations for both types. What's important is not only is it coming from a source material directly from it, whether that be from the IFRS or Companies House, it also comes from a trusted source that we can verify ourselves. Another key one is looking at bias, understanding if that even if we think that our input wasn't biased, does the output demonstrate any degree of bias as well, based on how they might have been trained? These tools are designed to be as bias-free as possible, but they're not totally impervious. So it's important that we still look at the outputs and we always apply that healthy level of professional skepticism when reviewing these GenAI tools. Another one as well is looking at relevance. Does it really address the specific task in terms of what we've asked it to do? Making sure it matches our intentions is really key. And lastly, one of the things to look for from an ethics first approach is if you're considering using GenAI tool in your business or practice, please do consider the things that are on this list here, whether it be from GDPR certification to whether it has a business enterprise plan, which gives additional assurances from a security point of view. Does it have IT app and documentation transparency so your IT team can review? Looking at SOC type 1 and type 2, and also being able to access your data retention controls, turning on and turning off its ability to train on your answers.
Thank you, Peter. And I think, again, we've got lots of questions coming in. And for instance, if we're using some AI tools, the terms and conditions are that that data sort of is going out in the world, isn't it? So we wouldn't want to use, for instance, I think ChatGPT would be one of them, where you wouldn't want to put confidential client or company information on it without it being a version which is held within your company, like, you know, a co-pilot or a specific version of it. Is that right?
Absolutely. So there are, when you have separate instances that's done on your own premises, there are also enterprise plans available which can be configured for your specific need. It's important that you read their documentation and what assurances that you need for your own organization, as well as for your clients to uphold their confidentiality too.
Yeah, so it is an area, in answer to all the people that have asked about that, it is an area to be very careful with. Now, okay, we've been, if you like, a little bit negative or cautious because we need to be to keep things safe and ethical. But I know people attending the conference will be excited about using some of the tools that you've been talking about, but might be wondering how should they use it in their roles. So can you give some examples of use cases for some example roles?
Absolutely. So this is where it gets to the really exciting bit. So I'm excited to share it. Looking at our use cases, there's a whole wide range of roles that we might think about, whether you're a CFO, a finance controller, and somebody who's working in FP&A, or that's even newly qualified. There's a range of applications that we can look at and think about. Let's take, for example, the CFO, somebody that's looking at strategy and getting the team to function as well and as efficiently that they can. Using generative AI can really elevate their time savings throughout their day by automating processes that you have, whether that be in financial reporting or within your financial operations or within your audit preparation too. That's something that we can assist with. If you're a financial controller, you might also want to consider how it might help with your quarter end or month end as well, whether it be from a reconciliation perspective to writing commentary on your analysis on a P&L or balance sheet. If you're a finance business partner, GenAI tools bring a really new level of insight that otherwise won't be attainable. By being able to connect internal data sets from disparate sources that may be from operational as well as finance, it means you can really aggregate new data together and be able to understand what strategic initiatives you can drive forward as being a business partner. You might be a financial reporting accountant, in which case you're dealing with a lot of compliance, whether that be with local standards under UK GAAP or with international standards, whether that be from IFRS or any other reporting standard. Being able to have access to a GenAI tool that can perform deep research and help answer you the most complex subjective questions really goes above and beyond what's traditionally available through whether it be a Google search or even looking through the traditional source material, manually going through the IFRS, finding the relevant paragraph and understanding its interpretation. We can now suddenly be able to do that in a much, much quicker time. As I say, it doesn't devolve the need for the human at all. It's shifting. It can help shift us from the preparer to the reviewer. So, of course, we always want to check our outputs.
Thank you. And the future outlook and Q&A. Again, there are questions sort of asking, when do you think AI might be able to prepare a set of financial statements from the data, just do the whole thing compliant with UK GAAP and Companies Act and whatever? Are we getting close to that? Maybe not. So what have we got as a future outlook?
Well, Julia, the future is fast moving and it's only getting faster at an order of magnitude. And we can see that with how the trend has gone. With generative AI right now, not only has the product developed, but the rate of improvement is also accelerating. Within the last 3 years, ChatGPT went from 10 million users all the way now to about 460 million monthly active users. It's a massive increase. And that applies to the other big 5 as well. In terms of the outlook for finance and what's on the horizon, we can really distill it into 3 key stages, which we can foresee in the future. The first one is human in the loop, what we're experiencing now, and there'll be further degrees in the short term. Human in the loop really means that we're actively guiding and reviewing these GenAI outputs, for example, like drafting narratives or estimates, where the GenAI might feel like it's performing 80% of that preparation work, and we're stepping in at that output stage for that final review and edit and sign off. Of course, with any kind of documentation or output, it's the human that's ultimately responsible for the sign off, and that we're the ones that are responsible. In terms of moving forward into that midterm, we start to see a new wave where the human is now out of the loop or after the loop. GenAI can then operate over time going forward with less and less human intervention, coordinating tasks and producing near comprehensive documents from start to end. For example, our financial statements, where in the future we'll be able to expect it to see from a trial balance, produce a set of financial statements with front half and back half, with then certain parameters that we need to check for exceptions. For example, differences, reconciliation issues, out-of-date narrative, and etc. And then finally, really looking on that horizon for what that might look in the long term is looking at full autonomy from a GenAI perspective. This is where GenAI independently produces the outputs and action from raw data, with no human intervention during the process. Now, this can fundamentally change what a profession might look like, and it might be coming sooner than we think, given the rate of improvement. GenAI could create audited financial statements from the trial balances, meeting all regulatory standards, and also achieving reconciliation and taking time throughout the process. Ultimately, this shows a maximal efficiency gain. Ultimately, we still have human sign-off, and now humans are allowed within our profession to focus on new areas of work, which is terribly exciting to see how it will unfold.
Terribly exciting or terribly terrifying, possibly. But I mean, that last point answers Jessica's question, which was about the financial statements, that we could be as close to 2028 or 2030 with AI being able to bring that all together. Which brings us to questions. I think, and what do we want to think about? Well, our audience is interested. If AI is doing all these things, but the human still needs to check things, how can you review, Elaine says, if you've never had the experience of preparing? Now, that's perhaps a bit of an unfair question for you, because you're maybe not doing that staff training, but I wonder if you've heard anything, and then I might chip in as well. Have you heard anything about how people are training their people?
It's a really good question. And the answer is more and more organizations will be investing in training how to use GenAI tools, particularly when these are deployed en masse throughout the organization, not just within the finance or accounting team. A lot of companies are deploying them across their sales function and marketing function, and they're deciding to roll these out across the organization. Where the specific training will be required and helpful is when there are finance-specific domains, subject areas, and expertise where general training might not be able to suffice. So it's important to start thinking now about what kind of training there is out there, and also where we can get that from and how that can be supported.
And I think if I just add to that, because my background is in training, the whole traditional way that we've trained, do that preparation task for years before you start reviewing, is definitely going to go out of the window. So if we want that human in the loop approach, where we've got to sort of review it and check it, we are going to need to be quite imaginative about how we train. And I think it's going to accelerate. People coming out as graduates, or even school leavers into the profession, are going to quickly be dealing with these higher order sort of things, because the AI will be doing a lot more of the grunt work, for want of a better word. So maybe just time for one more question. I'm going to have a quick look. There's a few comments on the environmental costs, the energy costs from an AI point of view. And I know this, we're not focusing on the energy cost, but I just wanted to mention it. It is something that companies might want to consider. But I guess also, if things get done quicker, whilst it might be using a lot of energy for that period of time, maybe overall the energy usage isn't that different. If it's going to take me a week to do it, or AI 5 seconds, perhaps it doesn't matter. Have you heard any concerns from companies implementing this about the energy usage, Peter?
Question, Julia. And it's a valid concern for a lot of businesses to have. These GenAI models are all driven by large data centers and warehouses, and they consume a lot of energy. So from the organization's point of view, it's important to consider what your ESG strategy might look like, and in terms of how you might be aligned with your wider technology usage and how you might offset that, whether that be through Scope 1, Scope 2, or Scope 3 emissions. That's a really important consideration. I certainly know from OpenAI's perspective that they are concerned with the energy costs. Just recently, Sam Altman came out with saying that the fact that people put please and thank you in their messages has cost them tens of millions of dollars just from that, because the extra electricity needed to process please and thank you.
Gosh, that's so no more pleases and thank yous to GenAI. So,
well, maybe still be good to be polite. We want to be on their good side.
Well, yes, that brings us a whole nother question, which we won't go into today. So we're wrapping the session up. Is there any final thought, Peter, on what should people do next? Just literally in a minute, what should people do next?
Well, Julia, in terms of next steps, it's really important to get your conversations started with your teams, peers, and with your business. If you haven't had that previous wake up call now, this is your wake up call to really act on generative AI, see the effect that it's having, not only with your finance and accounting, but also within the wider organization, and in terms of our skills too. It's really important that this is a pivotal moment in terms of future-proofing careers and by embracing a new technology, so that we can adapt and be able to provide more meaningful, enriching work, which will ultimately benefit the profession.
Thank you very much, Peter. A fascinating session, and I can see from the comments that we've got people who don't use it to people who are, really thinking about it in depth. There is a lot on terms of ICAEW resources, including detailed examples of how to use it and prompt ideas for, audit and all sorts of other things. So, maybe use GenAI to search for those things, focusing on ICAEW resources. Now, next up, we've got quality in audit and assurance starting at 11:45. So head to the lobby, remember, join the next session from there. Thank you to Peter, and I'll see the rest of you at the next session. Thank you.
Sure, everybody.